Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back to the winter of 1799, into the quiet final months of George Washington's life at Mount Vernon. You'll see what it meant to wake before dawn in a house that creaks with memory, to feel the weight of a nation's promises pressing on a body that's finally beginning to fail. So let's begin. You wake before the sun, as you always have. The air in the bedroom is cold enough to see your breath, and the fire has burned down to ash. You push yourself upright, feeling the pull in your shoulders, the stiffness in your knees. 67 years have carved themselves into your bones. The floorboards creak under your weight as you stand, and somewhere below you hear the house beginning to stir. Mount Vernon in late winter smells of wood smoke and wet earth, the kind of damp that gets into everything. You dress yourself slowly, each button a small negotiation with fingers that don't bend the way they used to. The wool coat scratches against your neck, too heavy for the weak fire in the study but necessary for the walk you'll take. Your boots are by the door, mud still caked on the heels from yesterday. Outside, the sky's the colour of iron. You move through the hall, past portraits that don't quite look like you, past furniture that Martha chose years ago when the house felt full of future instead of past. The stairs complain under your feet. Everything here makes noise as if the estate itself is growing old alongside you. In the study, papers wait on your desk. They always wait. Letters, ledgers, petitions from men who fought under you and now need pensions, need land, need something you promised them when promises felt easier to keep. The ink in the well has frozen overnight. You'll need to warm it by the fire before you can write anything. The maps on the wall have faded, their colours bleeding into each other until you can barely tell where one territory ends and another begins. You built a nation on those maps, or tried to. Now they look like ghosts of intention, like something that might dissolve if you touch them too hard. Your hands ache as you flex them, trying to work warmth into the joints, old battle injuries, old breaks that healed crooked. The doctors told you years ago that this was coming, that the body keeps its own ledger and eventually presents the bill. You ignored them then. You ignore the pain now, mostly. The republic you helped build feels fragile this morning, brittle in a way that has nothing to do with the cold. It's something you sense rather than see, like the way you used to sense an enemy's position in the fog. The nation is restless. You read it in the letters, hear it in the arguments that reach you even here, miles from Philadelphia. Men who fought together now fight each other with words that cut deeper than bayonets. You walk to the window and look out over the fields. The land rolls away toward the Potomac, white with frost, empty of movement except for a few servants making their way toward the outbuildings. Smoke rises from the slave quarters. You see it every morning, and every morning you feel the same tightness in your chest that has nothing to do with the winter air. Freedom, you said. Liberty. The words sit in your mouth like stones. The revolution was supposed to end something. Instead, it started arguments that will outlive you. You know this. You've known it for years. But standing here in this cold room, watching your breath fog the glass, you feel the weight of it more than usual. The estate is quiet in the way that only early morning can be, before the day's demands begin their assault. You hear Martha moving in another part of the house, her footsteps steady and familiar. She's been your constant for longer than you've been anyone's general, anyone's president. The thought comforts you less than it should. You turn back to the desk and sit, wincing as your hip protests. The chair is the same one you've used for a decade, shaped to your body by years of sitting, but it feels harder now. Everything feels harder now. The letters need answering. The ledgers need reviewing. There's a petition from a widow in Virginia, another from a former soldier in Pennsylvania who says his land grant was never fulfilled. You promised them so much. The words came easily when you were winning, when the future seemed like something you could shape with enough will and enough blood. Now you're not sure you kept even half of those promises. The quill scratches as you try to write, but your hand shakes and the letters come out wrong. You stop, put the pen down, flex your fingers again. This is what defeat looks like, you think. Not losing a battle, but losing the ability to hold a pen steady. Not retreating from an army, but retreating from your own body, inch by inch, year by year. Outside, the light is starting to change. Dawn comes slowly in winter, reluctant, as if it knows what kind of day it's bringing. You stand again and move to the fire, kneeling with difficulty to add wood to the coals. The effort makes your chest hurt, a deep ache that spreads from your ribs to your throat. You've felt it before, this sensation of something tightening inside you. You tell yourself it's nothing, just age, just the cold. The fire catches, and you sit back on your heels watching the flames take hold. For a moment, there's nothing but the sound of wood burning, the pop and hiss of sap heating. This, you think, is what peace was supposed to feel like. Quiet, controlled. A fire in your own home, burning exactly as you want it to burn. But even now, even here, you can't quite believe in it. The silence feels temporary, like the pause between volleys. You push yourself upright and return to the window. The sun is rising now, casting long shadows across the frost. The Potomac gleams in the distance, a ribbon of silver cutting through the trees. You built a life here, built a nation there, and somehow both feel equally impossible this morning. The house creaks around you, settling or complaining, you can't tell which. Every board, every beam carries memory. You've lived in this structure longer than you've lived in any other, but it still doesn't quite feel like yours. You're a visitor in your own life, watching from outside the frame, waiting for something you can't name. Once, men called you general. The title came with cannons and cavalry, with decisions that ended or saved lives. You wore it like armour, felt its weight settle on your shoulders the way a good coat should fit. Now they call you Mr. President, past tense, a title you've already shed but can't quite escape. The letters on your desk still arrive daily, though you've been out of office for 2 years. Some praise you as the father of the nation, the indispensable man. Others call you a tyrant in sheep's clothing, a monarch without a crown. You read both kinds with the same expression, carefully neutral, though your jaw tightens more at the latter. You've learned to carry your face like a mask. It's a skill you developed young and perfected in command, this ability to show nothing while feeling everything. Martha says it makes you hard to read. She's not wrong. You tell yourself you wanted peace. You said it in your farewell address, meant it when you wrote the words about stepping down, about returning to private life. But sitting in this study, reading reports of French aggression and domestic upheaval, you miss command. You miss the clarity of it, the simple mathematics of strategy and supply. In war, you knew what you were doing. The objective was clear, the enemy obvious, the path forward something you could mark on a map. In peace, everything blurs. The revolution was supposed to end war. That's what you told the soldiers when you sent them home, when you gave up your commission and walked away from absolute power. You made that gesture deliberately, consciously, knowing how rare it was for a military leader to simply stop. You wanted to set a precedent, to show that this new nation would be different, that power would not corrupt, would not concentrate, would not become the very thing you'd fought against. But it didn't end war. It just changed what war looked like. Now they fight each other with newspapers and legislation, with factions and parties you never wanted to see exist. Hamilton and Jefferson circle each other like wolves, each convinced the other will destroy the country. You've tried to stay above it, to maintain some dignity, some distance. It hasn't worked. They've dragged you into their arguments anyway, used your name like a weapon to bludgeon their opponents. Somewhere deep inside, in a place you don't examine too closely, you wonder if stepping down was cowardice or wisdom. The question nags at you in quiet moments, when you're alone with your thoughts and can't distract yourself with correspondence or estate business. You had power, real power, and you gave it away. Part of you is proud of that choice. It's the thing your most certain history will remember. The gesture that separated you from every king and general who came before. But another part, smaller and meaner, whispers that you simply didn't want to deal with the mess, that you saw the nation tearing itself apart and chose to leave rather than fight to hold it together. The desk is covered with reminders of what you left behind. A petition from veterans seeking land they were promised. A letter from Adams, now president, asking your advice on French diplomacy. A newspaper clipping calling you the American Cincinnatus, the soldier who became a farmer. They don't understand that Cincinnatus went back because Rome called him. You're not sure America wants you back. You're not sure you'd go if it did. You pick up the petition and read it again, though you've already memorized the words. A soldier named Williams, served 3 years in the Continental Army, lost his farm while he was fighting, was promised land in the Ohio Territory in compensation. The land was never granted. Now he has 6 children and no way to feed them. He's writing to you because you're the only person he thinks might care. You should care. You do care. But caring doesn't give you the authority to fix it anymore. That's someone else's job now. You draft a response in your mind, careful and diplomatic. You'll forward his petition to the appropriate office. You'll add your recommendation. You'll use whatever influence you still carry. It won't be enough. It never is. The veterans write to you because they remember when your word meant something, when you could order supplies or allocate land with a signature. They don't understand that you're just a man now, a private citizen, a farmer with a famous name and no real power. Or maybe they understand perfectly, and they're writing to you anyway because they have no one else. That thought is worse. Outside you hear the dogs barking, someone is arriving, probably just a messenger or a neighbour, but your body tenses anyway. You've never quite lost the instinct to prepare for trouble, to assume every unexpected sound might be a threat. Martha says you still sleep like a soldier, light and ready. She's not wrong about that either. You stand and walk to the mantel, where a small mirror hangs. Your reflection looks back at you, older than you expect every time you see it. The face the portrait painters create bears only a passing resemblance to this one. They smooth your skin, add colour to your cheeks, put light in your eyes that hasn't been there in years. They paint the myth, not the man. You are not marble. The thought comes unbidden, almost bitter. You are skin and regret and calluses and old scars that ache in cold weather. You are the way your teeth hurt, the way your stomach rebels against rich food, the way you have to squint to read anymore. Your splinters under your nails from this morning's walk, dried ink on your fingers, the smell of horse and tobacco that never quite washes out of your clothes. The myth will outlive you. You know this. They're already building it brick by brick while you're still breathing. In 50 years, 100, you'll be whatever they need you to be. A saint, a villain, a symbol, just not a man. The dogs have stopped barking. The visitor, whoever it was, has been dealt with by someone else. You're not needed. You haven't been needed for a long time. This is what you wanted, you remind yourself. Peace, privacy, a chance to tend your farm and live out your remaining years without the weight of a nation on your shoulders. But standing here in this study, staring at your own tired face, you can't quite make yourself believe it. The study smells of tobacco and ink, old leather and yesterday's fire. You've spent more hours in this room than you care to count, more than you spent in any tent during the war. It's become your command centre in peacetime, though what you command now are crop rotations and household accounts. The walls are lined with books you've collected over decades, some read, some aspirational. Above them hang the maps, faded now to ghosts of their former clarity. Boundaries that seemed so important once, territories fought over and died for, now bleeding into each other like watercolours in rain. You run your finger along the spine of a volume on agriculture, one of the few books you've actually read cover to cover. The leather is cracked from handling, from being carried in your coat pocket on walks through the fields. This is what your life has become. Soil management, drainage systems, crop yield. It should feel peaceful. It doesn't. The desk dominates the room, massive and scarred from years of use. Every mark tells a story. The burn where a candle tipped over in 1783 when you got word of the peace treaty. The gouge where you slammed a letter opener down after reading another attack in the papers. The ink stain that won't come out, shaped like a map of some country that doesn't exist. You keep the desk orderly because disorder makes you uneasy. Letters in one stack. Ledgers in another. A separate pile for correspondence that requires immediate attention. Everything has its place, its system, its proper arrangement. Order was how you survived the war. It's how you survive now. On the wall opposite the maps hangs a portrait of Martha. She sat for it 10 years ago, and the artist captured something you recognise, a steadiness in her eyes that has anchored you more times than you can count. She's the only person who's seen you at your worst, the only one you don't have to perform for. When you're alone with her, you can let the mask slip. Not completely, never completely, but enough to breathe. The room mirrors you in ways you find uncomfortable when you think about it too long. Maintained but haunted, every object in here carries memory. The writing desk where you drafted your farewell address, agonising over every word, knowing it would be picked apart by people who'd never worn a uniform or made a decision that cost lives. The chair where you sat when you learned your brother was dead. The bookshelf you built yourself during a rare moment of peace in the early days of your marriage. You've tried to make this space civilian, domestic, separate from the general you used to be. But command tents have a way of following you. The smell of canvas and gunpowder never quite leaves your clothes, even when you burn them. The sound of drums still wakes you some mornings, phantom noise from battles decades past. You remember the tent at Valley Forge, how the cold got through every layer, how you'd wake with frost on your blanket and men dying 50 yards away. You remember the smell of it, unwashed bodies and sickness and wood smoke. And how you'd sit at a camp desk not so different from this one, writing orders you weren't sure anyone would follow. That desk was smaller, rougher, but you felt more yourself there than you do here. Maybe because the role was clearer. General was something you could be, a set of responsibilities you understood. This, whatever this is, feels more ambiguous. Former president, retired general, gentleman farmer, none of them fit quite right. You walk to the window and look out at the estate. From here you can see the main lawn, the drive leading down to the road, the outbuildings arranged with geometric precision. Martha's garden, bare now in winter but still maintaining its careful symmetry. You've imposed order on this land the way you imposed it on an army, and it shows. Everything is measured, planned, intentional. The view should give you satisfaction. It doesn't. Beyond the gardens and fields, beyond the tree line, you can see a sliver of the Potomac. The river is high with winter melt, moving fast, brown with mud. You watch it sometimes and think about how water just flows, doesn't plan or organise or consider consequences. It finds the path of least resistance and follows it. You've never been water. You've always been stone, choosing the hard way because it seemed more honest. The floor creaks behind you, and you turn expecting Martha, but the room is empty. Just the house settling, joints expanding or contracting with temperature changes. Old buildings make noise. So do old men. You've learned not to startle at every sound, though your body still tenses, still prepares for threat even when there isn't one. On the shelf near the door sits your uniform preserved in a glass case, blue and buff, weathered but maintained. Martha wanted to display it. You wanted to burn it. You compromised, as you've compromised on everything in your marriage. The uniform gets its case, but you don't have to look at it. Except you do look at it, more than you should. The coat seems smaller now, as if it's shrinking or you've grown. You remember the weight of it, the way it felt like armour and burden both. When you wore it, you knew who you were. When you took it off for the last time, you felt both lighter and more lost. The study grows darker as clouds move across the sky outside. You should light more candles, should tend the fire before it dies completely, but you sit instead, letting the gloom gather. Sometimes you think this room is the only honest place in the house, maybe in your life. Here, alone, you don't have to pretend the myths are true. You can be tired, uncertain, old. You can acknowledge that the nation feels like it's coming apart and you don't know how to stop it. The walls hold your secrets. The desk knows your doubts. The maps have witnessed your failures. This room has seen you cry twice, both times when you thought you'd lost everything. Once in 1776 after Brooklyn. Once in 1790 when you realised the presidency was destroying you from the inside. You walked to the window both times and stared out at nothing. Let the tears come silently, then wiped your face and went back to work. Grief is a luxury you've never quite been able to afford. Martha's footsteps echo down the hall, steady and familiar. You hear her pause, probably listening to see if you're working or if you need something. She won't interrupt unless you call. That's another compromise, another boundary you've negotiated over years. She gives you space, and you pretend it's what you want. The footsteps continue, fading toward the kitchen. You're alone again, the way you prefer, the way you tell yourself you prefer. The fire pops, startling you. A log shifts, sending up sparks. You should add more wood. You should answer the letters. You should review the accounts, check on the livestock, do any of the 100 small tasks that make up your days now. Instead, you sit in the gathering dark, in this room that smells like memory and tobacco, and let yourself feel the weight of everything you're carrying. The study holds you, familiar and cold, maintained and haunted, like everything else you've built. You rise before dawn as you always did in war. The habit is carved into your bones deeper than fatigue, deeper than the desire to stay in bed where it's warm. When the darkness is absolute and the house is silent, you push yourself upright and begin the day. There's no bugle, no drums, just the internal clock that has governed your life since you were young. Martha stirs beside you, but doesn't wake. She's learned to sleep through your early departures, learned that asking you to rest longer is pointless. You dress in the dark by feel, each garment where you left it the night before. Shirt, vest, breeches, stockings. The routine is identical every morning, has been for decades. Variation introduces chaos, and chaos gets people killed. Even here, even now you follow the discipline. The boots are cold. The leather stiff. You pull them on anyway. Downstairs the house is empty of people, but full of presents. Servants will be awake soon, starting fires, preparing breakfast, beginning their own routines. You move through the hall without light, know every floorboard by memory, which ones creak and which are silent. Outside, the air hits your face like a slap. Cold enough to hurt, winter refusing to release its grip even as March approaches. The sky is starless, overcast, the kind of dark that feels total. You walk anyway, down the steps and across the lawn toward the fields. Your breath fogs in front of you. Your hands are already numb inside your gloves. This is the walk you take every morning, weather permitting, sometimes weather not permitting. You check the fences, the boundaries, the state of the land. It's an inspection. Though you don't call it that. Habit, duty. The need to know that everything is where it should be, that the night hasn't brought disaster. The fields stretch out invisible in the darkness. You know they're there the way you know your own face, every acre measured and documented. You count them sometimes as you walk, the way you once counted regiments. 400 acres in corn, 200 in wheat, 50 in pasture. The numbers give you something to hold on to, a way to organise the world. A fence post leans slightly to the left. You stop, test it with your hand, feel the give in the wood. It'll need replacing. You make a mental note, add it to the list of repairs that never ends. Keeping an estate running is like maintaining an army. You fix one problem and 3 more appear. The difference is nobody dies here when you make a mistake. The workers will be in the fields later once there's light. You see their quarters in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys. The slaves, you mean. The workers is what you call them, but you know what they are. The weight of that knowledge sits in your stomach like lead. You've written about it, thought about it, wrestled with it. You've made provisions in your will, arrangements that feel both too little and more than most men in your position would consider. It doesn't make the weight lighter. You turn back toward the house. The walk has warmed you slightly, though your fingers still ache. The sky's beginning to grey at the edges, not quite dawn, but no longer full night. This is your favourite time, these minutes between dark and light, when the world feels suspended. The dogs find you on the path back. 3 of them. Hounds you keep for hunting, though you rarely hunt anymore. They circle your legs, tails moving, breath steaming. You reach down to scratch behind their ears, feel their warmth against your cold hands. They don't care about your reputation, your failures, your legacy. They just want food and affection and to walk beside you. Simple needs, simply met. Back at the house, smoke rises from the kitchen chimney. Someone has started the fires. The routine of the place is like machinery, each part moving at the correct time. You enter through the side door, stamp mud from your boots, hang your coat on the peg. Inside, warmth. The smell of bread baking, coffee brewing, the house coming alive. You pour tea, not whiskey. Age has made you careful about what you put in your body. Time was, you could drink the night away and fight the next morning. Now a single glass of port makes you pay for it the next day. Your body is no longer interested in being pushed, in accommodating your will. It has its own agenda, its own schedule of decay. The cup warms your hands. You stand at the window and watch the light grow. Trees emerge from darkness, then the fence line, then the road in the distance. Morning arrives piece by piece, revealing a world you already know by heart. You hear Martha upstairs, her movements overhead. Soon she'll come down and the day will begin in earnest. Breakfast, correspondence, visitors if any are expected, the endless small maintenance of a life. It should feel peaceful. Everyone tells you how lucky you are to have this place, this rest, this escape from public life. They don't understand that discipline remains, but urgency is gone. That you still wake like a soldier but have nothing to march toward. The tea is bitter on your tongue. You didn't add sugar, forgot or didn't care. You drink it anyway, staring out at your land, your estate, your carefully maintained corner of the world. Somewhere in the background you hear hooves on the frozen road. A distant carriage, someone else's journey. You track the sound automatically, habit of command. Where are they going? How fast? How many horses? Information you don't need but collect anyway. The dogs bark, then quiet. Whatever caught their attention has passed. You finish your tea, set the cup down, prepare yourself for the day. This is your life now. Fence repairs and tea, dawn walks and ledgers. The discipline remains, but the urgency is gone. You tell yourself this is what you wanted, what you fought for. The right to stand in your own house and watch the morning come, nothing more dramatic than that. You almost believe it. They call you the father of the nation. The phrase appears in newspapers, in letters, in toasts given at dinners you don't attend. Father. As if you gave birth to something, as if the country emerged from you whole and intended. You know better. Fathers are supposed to guide their children, teach them how to live, watch them grow into something better than themselves. But fathers rarely see their children love each other. Your children, if that's what they are, spend their time tearing at each other's throats. Jefferson and Hamilton can't stand to be in the same room. Adams and Jefferson, once friends, now communicate through surrogates and newspaper essays. The Federalists think the Republicans are anarchists. The Republicans think the Federalists are monarchists. Both sides invoke your name like a weapon, claim you would support their position, use your words out of context to prove their points. This is not what you imagined when you gave up command. Pamphlets praise your virtue, your restraint, your decision to step down after 2 terms. They call you American Cincinnatus, the general who returned to his farm. They print your farewell address and underline the parts they like. Ignore the parts that complicate their arguments. You're being transformed into marble while you're still breathing, shaped into whatever form the moment requires. Other pamphlets attack you. They say you wanted to be king, that the presidency was just monarchy in disguise. They claim you were too friendly with England, too hard on France, too soft on both. They accuse you of being senile, out of touch, a relic of the previous generation clinging to power you no longer understand. Some of these attacks come from men who fought beside you, who knew you when the outcome was uncertain and the cause felt pure. That betrayal cuts deeper than enemy fire ever did. You stare at your reflection in the small mirror above your wash basin. The face that looks back is not the face in the portraits. The painters add nobility you don't feel, strength you no longer possess. They smooth your skin, brighten your eyes, make you taller somehow. They paint the myth, not the man. The myth has perfect teeth. Your teeth are wooden, ivory, a constant source of pain and embarrassment. The myth stands straight and tall. You stoop now, your spine bent from years of riding an injury. The myth is marble. Your skin stretched over aging bone, liver spots on your hands, a tremor in your fingers that worsens every year. You are not marble. The thought repeats itself as you shave, as you dress, as you prepare to be the version of yourself the world expects. Your splinters under your nails from this morning's fence repair. You are the ache in your hip that makes you walk with a barely perceptible limp. You are the way you have to read letters twice now because your eyes don't focus the way they used to. You are regret shaped like a man, trying to hold himself upright long enough to make it look like you knew what you were doing. The public sees founder. They see first president, they see the man who could have been king and chose not to be. This is your greatest achievement, this choice, and you know it, but they don't see what it cost. They don't see the nights you lay awake wondering if you'd made the right decision, if the nation was ready for what you'd started, if stepping down was wisdom, or just cowardice dressed up as principle. A letter arrives in the afternoon mail, forwarded from Philadelphia. Another veteran, another request. This one wants you to speak at a memorial for fallen soldiers. They're building a monument, nothing fancy, just a stone marker in a churchyard. But they want your words, your blessing, your presence to make it mean something. You draft a response declining as gently as possible. Your health, you say, the weather, the distance. All true, but not the real reason. The real reason is you're tired of being a symbol. You're tired of standing in front of people and watching them see through you to the myth they've constructed. You're tired of reading grief in the faces of widows whose husbands died following your orders. But you can't write that. So you make excuses, send regrets, promise to send a letter they can read aloud in your absence. The myth can attend the memorial. The man will stay home. Martha finds you in the study as the afternoon light fails. She doesn't say anything, just places a hand on your shoulder, a familiar weight. She knows. She's the only one who knows, really. She's seen you sick, seen you afraid, seen you sit at this desk and weep when you thought the nation was lost. She's the witness to your humanity, and sometimes you resent her for it. Because if she knows you're just a man, if she sees through the marble, then maybe everyone else does too. Maybe the myth is more fragile than you think. They're still writing, you say, gesturing at the letters on your desk. Even now, after everything. Of course they are, Martha says. You're George Washington. The way she says your name, you can hear the quotation marks around it. You're not you. You're George Washington, the public figure, the myth. Even she makes the distinction. I don't know how to be him anymore, you admit. I'm not sure I ever did. You did, she says. You still do, whether you want to or not. She's right, and you hate that she's right. You can't stop being George Washington any more than you can stop the sun from rising. The role has consumed the person, or maybe there never was much of a person to begin with. Maybe you've always been performance, discipline imposed on chaos, a myth that convinced itself it was real. Outside, the light is almost gone. Another day survived. The letters still need answering, but they can wait until tomorrow. Everything can wait until tomorrow. You're the father of the nation, but fathers rarely see their children love each other. You built something, started something, set something in motion. Whether it was the right something, whether it will survive, whether they'll forgive you for your part in it, these are questions you can't answer. The mirror on the wall shows you an old man in a dimly lit room. Not marble, just skin and regret and the terrible weight of a name that doesn't belong to you anymore if it ever did. You read petitions for soldiers' pensions, the same kind of documents you've been reading for years. Williams needs land, Thompson needs back pay, Carter needs a letter of reference for employment. Each petition is a story of service and sacrifice, a life interrupted by war and never quite put back together. You read them carefully, even though your eyes hurt, even though you know your recommendations carry less weight now than they did when you wore a uniform. The ledgers sit beside the petitions, columns of numbers representing the estate's accounts. Income from crops, expenses for supplies, wages for hired workers, costs for maintaining the property. You review each line, checking for errors, for theft, for the inevitable decay that eats at all enterprises. The numbers should balance, but they rarely do. There's always something unexpected, something that costs more than anticipated. Keeping Mount Vernon running is like commanding an army with insufficient supplies, which is to say it's like commanding any army you ever led. You correct mistakes in the margins. Your handwriting cramped and less steady than it used to be. Every act feels smaller now. When you were president, you signed legislation that affected millions. You made decisions about war and peace, about the shape of the government, about the nation's relationship with the world. Your signature opened ports or closed them, sent men to their deaths or brought them home. Now you sign receipts for flour and nails. You review contracts with tenant farmers. You approve spending for fence repairs and barn maintenance. The scale has shrunk, and you with it. Adam sends correspondence from Philadelphia, not quite asking for advice, but clearly wanting it. The French situation is deteriorating. There's talk of war, of naval conflicts, of American ships being seized. He wants to know what you think, what you would do, whether you believe the nation is ready for another fight. You read his letter twice, understanding what he's really asking. He wants you to come back. Not officially, not publicly, but he wants your presence, your weight, the credibility that your name still carries. He wants the myth to shore up his presidency. You draft a response in your head, then on paper, then cross it out and start again. You want to tell him the truth, that you're tired, that you don't trust your judgment anymore, that the last thing the nation needs is old men trying to relive their glory. But you can't write that, so you give him careful, diplomatic advice that commits you to nothing. You tell him to seek peace but prepare for war, to respect France but protect American interests, to trust his cabinet but make his own decisions. In other words, you tell him everything and nothing, the way you've learned to do over decades of public life. The work never ends. Even in retirement, even miles from the capital, you're still reviewing papers, still making decisions, still carrying the weight. You've tried to hand it off, tried to step back and let the next generation take over. But the Republic still calls, even when you pretend to be retired. Men still write seeking your opinion, your endorsement, your involvement. And you respond, because you can't not respond. You can't stop bleeding, even in silence. A petition from a widow catches your attention. Her husband served under you at Yorktown, was wounded there but survived long enough to make it home. He died 3 years ago and she's been trying to claim his pension ever since. The paperwork is lost, she says, or never filed, or filed incorrectly. She has 4 children. The youngest is 6. She needs help. You write a letter on her behalf, addressed to the pension office in Philadelphia. You state the facts plainly. Her husband served with distinction, was present at the siege, was wounded in service to his country. She is entitled to compensation. You sign your name and hope it matters. You know it probably won't. The bureaucracy doesn't care whose signature is on a letter. But you try anyway, because what else can you do? The afternoon passes in paperwork. You approve expenses, decline invitations, write recommendations, review contracts. The mechanical work of keeping a life running. It should feel peaceful, this orderly march through responsibilities. It doesn't. Every document reminds you of how far you've fallen from relevance. You used to command armies. Now you can't even guarantee a widow gets her pension. Outside you hear voices. Workers discussing the day's tasks, planning tomorrow's work. The estate functions around you. With you or without you. That's the truth you've been avoiding. You're not indispensable. You never were. The revolution would have happened without you. Maybe differently, but eventually. The presidency could have been filled by others. Hamilton or Adams or even Jefferson. The nation doesn't need George Washington. It just needs the myth of him. And myths don't require the participation of the man. You stand and walk to the window, trying to ease the stiffness in your back. The view is the same as always. Fields, trees, the river in the distance, your domain, such as it is. 300 acres of Virginia soil and a house full of memories. This is your legacy now. This careful cultivation of land and reputation. You can't stop leading, even in silence. The thought follows you back to your desk, sits beside you as you work through the remaining letters. You sign your name over and over, each signature a small act of authority, a tiny assertion that you still matter. George Washington. The letters are familiar, automatic. You've written them so many times they've lost meaning, become symbols instead of identity. Someone knocks at the door, a servant, asking if you need anything. You send them away. You don't need anything except time, and that's the one thing nobody can bring you. The papers pile up again as soon as you clear them. Tomorrow there will be more, and the day after that. The work never stops. The Republic never stops calling, even when you pretend not to hear, and you answer because you can't help yourself. You can't stop being who you've always been, even when that person no longer serves any purpose. The candles need replacing, the fire needs tending, the letters need answering. Always more work, always more demands, always the weight pressing down until you can barely breathe. This is what legacy feels like. Not glory, just labour. Not triumph, just responsibility that never ends. Europe burns again. The news reaches you in fragments, delayed by weeks of ocean crossing, but the pattern is clear. France has guillotined its king, then its queen, then anyone who looked at the wrong person the wrong way. The revolution that seemed so full of promise has devoured itself. Now Napoleon is rising, another general who won't stop at military victory. You read the reports with a sick feeling of recognition. You know how this story goes. The papers arrive irregularly, but when they do, you read them cover to cover. Philadelphia Aurora, Gazette of the United States, even the European papers when you can get them. The political landscape makes your head hurt. The nation you helped build is tearing itself apart over how to respond to France, to England, to its own identity. Federalists and Republicans tear at each other in print, their language growing more vicious every month. Hamilton writes essays calling Jefferson's supporters anarchists and atheists. Jefferson's people respond by calling Hamilton a monarchist and a British sympathiser. They both invoke your name, claim you would agree with them if you were still in power. You wouldn't agree with either of them, or you'd agree with both. The truth is somewhere in the middle, nuanced and complicated, and nobody wants nuance anymore. They want simple answers, clear enemies, certainty in uncertain times. You can't give them that. You never could. The names echo through the papers like ghosts. Jefferson, Hamilton, Adams, men you've known for decades, men you've worked with and argued with and tried to hold together in some kind of functional government. Now they can barely speak to each other. Jefferson resigned from your cabinet because he couldn't work with Hamilton anymore. Hamilton stayed longer, but eventually left too, driven out by the pressure and the attacks. Adams is president now, trying to navigate between the factions, trying to keep the nation from sliding into war with France or England, or both. You don't envy him the position. The correspondence that reaches you is full of coded appeals. Should we ally with England? Should we support France? Should we stay neutral and try to trade with everyone? You wrote an entire farewell address about staying out of foreign entanglements, about maintaining independence and neutrality. Nobody seems to have read it, or if they read it, they interpreted it to mean whatever they already believed. Words are slippery things. You say, avoid permanent alliances, and half the country hears support England, while the other half hears support France. Even in this quiet estate, politics echoes louder than cannon fire ever did. You can close your study door, but you can't close your ears to what's happening. The nation feels fragile, held together by the thinnest of threads. Any shock might break it apart. War with France, war with England, the Western territories seceding, the southern states going their own way, 1,000 possible disasters, and you're not in a position to prevent any of them. The papers cover your desk, ink smearing under your fingers. You read an essay by Hamilton defending the treaty you negotiated with England. It's brilliant, logical, well argued. You read Jefferson's response. Equally brilliant, equally logical, equally well argued, reaching exactly the opposite conclusion. They're both right. They're both wrong. The truth is somewhere between them, but admitting that would require both sides to compromise, and compromise has become a dirty word. A letter from Adams sits unopened. You know what it says without reading it. Help me. Tell them to stop fighting. Use your influence to bring them together. Be the father figure they'll listen to. You'll open it eventually and you'll write a careful response that says nothing useful. Because you don't know how to fix this. You didn't know how to fix it when you were president, and you don't know now. The fighting isn't about policy anymore. It's personal. It's about loyalty and betrayal, about who gets to define what the revolution meant, about what kind of nation America should be. Those aren't questions a single person can answer, even if that person is George Washington. The afternoon light slants through the window, illuminating dust motes. You watch them drift, aimless, carried by currents you can't see. That's what the nation feels like right now. Adrift, pushed by invisible forces, headed somewhere, but nobody knows where. You should find this relaxing. You're not responsible anymore. Someone else is in charge. The problems are Adams to solve, not yours. But you can't let go. You read every paper, follow every debate, track every shift in the political winds. You're like a captain watching his old ship from shore, seeing it head toward rocks and unable to do anything but watch. The slave quarters are visible from your window if you turn your head slightly to the right. Smoke rises from the chimneys. People living their lives, working your land, bound to this place by chains both literal and legal. The revolution was supposed to be about freedom, about the rights of man, about creating something better. Instead, you created a republic built on compromise, on postponed justice, on problems you couldn't solve, so you just passed them on to the next generation. In France, they tried to do it all at once. They proclaimed liberty, equality, fraternity, and then they started killing everyone who disagreed about what those words meant. Now they have Napoleon, another strong man, another general who thinks he can organize the chaos through force of will. You know how that story ends. You've been that general. The difference is you stopped. You stepped down. You gave up power when you could have kept it. That's supposed to be the lesson, the example, the thing that separates you from all the other military leaders who became tyrants. But watching the nation tear itself apart, reading these papers full of venom and accusation, you wonder if you just prolong the inevitable. Maybe nations can't survive peace. Maybe they need enemies to stay unified. Need external threats to keep internal factions from destroying each other. You gave them peace, and they turned on each other. Maybe that's your fault too. The papers pile up, full of news you can't change and opinions you can't influence. Europe burns, France convulses, your own nation tears at itself, and you sit in this quiet room pretending to be retired. Even in this quiet estate, politics echoes louder than cannon fire ever did. At least in war you knew who the enemy was. The winter cold settles deep in your chest like it's taken up residence. You wake in the morning and feel it there, a tightness that makes breathing slightly harder than it should be. You tell yourself it's nothing, just age, just the weather. Everyone your age complains about the cold. It gets into your bones, into your joints, makes everything hurt a little more. But this is different, though you won't admit it. This is inside, not outside. Your hands tremble when you write, not the slight shake of age, but something more pronounced. You tell yourself you just need warmth, need to eat better, need to rest more. You don't rest more. You've never been good at rest. The cough started 2 weeks ago, a small thing you ignored. Now it wakes you at night, sharp and painful. You muffle it in your pillow so you won't wake Martha. She worries enough without adding this to her list. During the day you clear your throat frequently, trying to dislodge whatever has settled there. Nothing works. Your breath shortens when you climb stairs, when you walk to the fields, when you do anything more strenuous than sitting at your desk. You blame it on being out of practice, on getting older, on not maintaining the physical discipline you kept during the war. But you know better. Your body's giving out on you in small ways, piece by piece, system by system. The pain in your hands has been there for years, old battle injuries that healed wrong and now make gripping a pen or a fork a conscious effort. But it's getting worse. This morning you dropped a cup. Just dropped it. Your fingers opening without your permission. The cup shattered on the floor and you stood there staring at your hand like it belonged to someone else. A soldier's body was meant to break in war. That's what you tell yourself. You saw it happen to thousands of men under your command. Bodies destroyed by shot and shell, by disease and exposure, by the grinding demands of sustained combat. Your body survived all that. Survived 8 years of war and 8 more years of presidency, and now it's quitting on you during peace. There's an irony there that you don't find amusing. You're 67, but you feel older. 70, 80, 100. The mirror shows you a man whose age passed his years, skin hanging loose where it used to be tight, eyes sunken, hair gone grey and thin. The portrait painters smooth all this away, make you look vigorous and alert. The truth is you're tired down to your bones, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You ignore the chest pain when it comes, sharp and brief, gone almost before you register it. Probably nothing, probably just strain. You've carried weight on your chest before, literal weight, musket and pack and ammunition. This is just an echo of that, your body remembering old burdens. You tell yourself this lie because the alternative is thinking about mortality, about the fact that every day you wake up is a day you didn't expect to see, and eventually there will be a morning when you don't wake up at all. The doctors would tell you to rest. That's what doctors always say. Rest, eat well, avoid excitement. You've ignored medical advice your entire life, survived smallpox and dysentery and a dozen other illnesses that killed stronger men. You'll survive this too, or you won't. Either way, there's work to do, and complaining won't get it done. You button your coat with effort, each button a small negotiation between intention and execution. Your fingers don't quite obey anymore, need coaxing, need time. You give them time. There's no rush, no battle to prepare for, no meeting that can't wait. Time is the one resource you have in abundance, except you're not sure that's true. Time feels more scarce now than it did when you were young and convinced of your own immortality. The walk to the fields takes longer than it used to. You pause twice, pretending to examine something, really just catching your breath. The cold air hurts going in, makes you cough. You turn away from the house so no one sees. The slaves working nearby don't look at you. They've learned not to see, learned to keep their eyes down and their attention on their work. You're grateful for their blindness, even though you know it's not real. They see everything. They just pretend not to. Your hip aches, your back aches, your hands ache. Everything aches, but you keep walking because stopping feels like giving up. You've never been good at giving up. You led an army that should have lost but didn't. You held together a government that should have collapsed but hasn't yet. You survived things that killed better men. You can survive a chest cold and some joint pain. You have to believe that because the alternative is acknowledging that your body is done, that it has fought its last battle and lost. The sun is weak today, barely warming the air. You stand at the edge of the field and look out over land you own but don't quite control. The soil does what it wants. The seasons come and go regardless of your will. You can organise and plan and impose order, but eventually the world does what it was always going to do. Your body, it turns out, is part of the world. Back in the house, you sit heavily in your chair. The fire helps a little, warming the outside even if it can't touch the cold inside your chest. You pick up a pen, try to write, watch your hand shake and make a mess of the letters. You put the pen down, you pick it up again, you force your fingers to cooperate, squeeze until they obey, until the letters form properly even if they're not neat. You are not done yet. Your body might be quitting, but you're not done. There's work to finish, letters to write, a legacy to secure. You can die after that, after you've done enough to make the struggle worth something, after you're sure they'll remember you for the right things, not the failures and compromises and moral cowardice. The thought of dying unremembered claws at you. It always has. You've spent your life building a reputation, constructing a public image, trying to be worthy of the role history assigned you. The thought that it might not matter, that history might forget or distort or simply not care, is worse than any physical pain. You cough again, deep and rattling. Something in your chest doesn't feel right. You ignore it. You've been ignoring your body's complaints for decades. There's no reason to start listening now. Breakfast arrives on a tray, the same as every morning. Corn cakes, still warm, with a small bowl of honey beside them. Weak tea, not coffee, because coffee makes your stomach hurt now. The sight of food should please you. Instead, you look at it with something close to indifference. Martha made sure the kitchen prepared what you like, or what you used to like. Corn cakes were your preference during the war, simple and filling, the kind of thing that kept you going through long campaigns. Now they just look like food, necessary but not appealing. You eat slowly, tasting memory more than flavour. There was a morning in 1778, Valley Forge, when you had corn cakes like these. The army was starving, and you gave most of your portion to a young soldier who looked like he might not make it through the night. You don't remember if he did. You remember the gesture, remember feeling noble about it, remember thinking that this is what leadership looked like. Now it just seems performative. You took food from your mouth and gave it to someone else because men were watching, because it made a good story. The soldier probably died anyway. Most of them did. The tea is bitter even with honey. You drink it because you need the warmth, need something to wash down the dry cake that sits in your mouth like sawdust. Your appetite is gone. You tell yourself it's the weather, that you'll feel better when spring comes, when the air warms and the cold releases its grip on your chest. But spring is weeks away, and you're not sure you'll make it. The thought comes unbidden, and you push it away. Martha talks of guests coming next week. Friends from Alexandria, she says. People you've known for years. They want to pay their respects, see how you're doing, spend an evening by the fire discussing old times. You nod but don't hear. The words wash over you like water, pleasant sounds that don't quite reach meaning. You're thinking about the soldier at Valley Forge, trying to remember his face. You can't. You remember the gesture but not the person. Remember your own actions but not the man they were meant to help. This bothers you more than it should. How many men did you command? Thousands. How many of them do you remember? Dozens, maybe. 100 if you count the officers. The rest are statistics, numbers in reports, casualties listed by regiment and company. They had faces once. They had names. Now they're just part of the story. Extras in the myth of George Washington leading the Continental Army to victory. The corn cake is half eaten on your plate. You pick at it, break off small pieces, put them in your mouth without tasting. Martha's still talking. Something about the menu, about making sure the wine cellar is stocked. You make appropriate noises, acknowledge without engaging. She's used to this, to you being present in body but absent in mind. She doesn't take it personally anymore. Your stomach rebels against the food, not violently, but with a low discomfort that suggests eating was a mistake. You push the plate away, drink more tea, try to settle the unease. Everything tastes wrong lately. Not bad, just wrong. Like your body has decided it no longer wants what it used to need. The doctors would say this is significant. You don't consult doctors. The breakfast room is small, intimate, a space for two people who've shared a life for decades. The walls are covered in familiar patterns. Wallpaper Martha chose years ago. A painting of the Potomac hangs over the mantel. Morning light comes through the east window, weak but present. This room should feel comfortable. It doesn't. Nothing feels comfortable anymore. Martha puts her hand on yours. a gentle touch that grounds you back to the present. Her skin is warm, yours is cold. She doesn't comment on this, just leaves her hand there, an anchor. You look at her and try to smile. Try to show that you're still here, still the man she married. She sees through it, she always does. But she smiles back anyway, playing the game because that's what marriage is after 30 years. You sit in silence, listening to the sounds of the house waking up around you. Servants moving through distant rooms, the kitchen preparing the day's meals. Somewhere outside, a dog barks. The ordinary sounds of life continuing, with you or without you. The food sits uneaten on your plate. The tea grows cold. Martha talks of guests and menus and plans for next week. You nod and agree and think about a soldier whose face you can't remember, whose name you never knew, who died in the snow because you gave him a corn cake and thought that made you a good leader. The breakfast tastes like ash in your mouth, like memory and regret, like everything you've done that wasn't enough to make the struggle matter. The walk to the orchard is longer than you remember. Your feet drag despite your intention to move with purpose. The apple trees are bare, skeletal against the grey sky, waiting for spring to remember what they're supposed to do. You carry pruning shears, old ones with worn wooden handles that fit your grip, or used to. Now your hands struggle to hold them steady. You move among the trees slowly, examining branches, looking for growth that needs cutting, for dead wood that should be removed. This is the kind of work that used to settle your mind, give you something concrete to do with your hands. Physical labour with a visible result. Now it just reminds you of how much harder everything has become. A branch hangs crooked, frost-damaged, clearly dying. You position the shears, try to close them with steady pressure. Your hands shake, making the cut uneven. The branch falls at your feet, and you stand there looking at it, at the jagged cut you made, at evidence of declining competence. There was a time you could do this kind of work for hours without tiring. You'd prune the entire orchard in a day, methodical and thorough, taking pride in the clean cuts and proper angles. Today you've managed 3 branches and you're already exhausted. Your breath comes short. The cold air hurts going into your lungs. You lower the shears, rest your hands on your thighs, wait for the tightness in your chest to ease. A stray dog appears at the edge of the orchard, thin and wary. You've seen it before, haunting the edges of the estate, surviving on scraps and skill. It watches you the way wild things watch, ready to run but curious about whether you might be a source of food. You reach into your pocket, find a piece of bread you brought for this purpose. You've been feeding this dog for weeks now, irregular offerings that don't quite constitute a relationship but aren't nothing either. The dog approaches carefully, keeping distance between you. You toss the bread. The dog snatches it from the air, wolfs it down, then sits and looks at you with something that might be gratitude. You extend your hand slowly, palm down, non-threatening. The dog considers, then takes a cautious step forward. It sniffs your glove, decides you're safe, and licks the leather where the bread left crumbs. The tongue is warm and rough and real. For a moment, standing in this cold orchard with a stray dog licking your glove, you forget the noise of the world. You forget the letters waiting on your desk, the political fighting, the nation tearing itself apart. You forget that you're George Washington, father of the nation, first president, the man who can never just be a man. You're just someone feeding a hungry dog in an apple orchard on a cold morning. The dog stays close for a minute, then seems to remember its wild nature and trots off toward the tree line. You watch it go, feeling something close to envy. The dog doesn't care about legacy or reputation. It just wants to survive, to find food, to make it through another day. Simple needs, simply pursued. You pick up the shears again, trying to remember which trees you've trimmed and which still need attention. They all look the same, bare branches against grey sky. You move to the next one. Raise the shears to a branch that looks diseased. Your hands won't cooperate. The shears slip, nearly fall. You catch them, but the effort makes your chest hurt. This is pointless. You're not accomplishing anything useful. You're just pretending to be productive, pretending you still have the strength and skill to maintain your own property. The truth is you need help, need workers to do what you used to do yourself. But admitting that feels like surrender. You lower the shears and turn back toward the house. The walk back is harder than the walk out. Your legs feel heavy, your breath short. Halfway across the lawn, you have to stop and rest. You stand there trying to look like you're examining something, really just waiting for the pain in your chest to subside. On the horizon, visible past the tree line, a flag flies at half-mast. You squint to see which building it's on, trying to remember if there's a funeral scheduled, some notable death that requires mourning. You can't remember. Someone died. Someone else's death, not yours. But it still feels like rehearsal. The flag hangs limp in the still air, a splash of colour against the grey. Half-mast means respect, means loss, means someone important enough to be publicly mourned. You've ordered that flag lowered dozens of times during your presidency, for founders and heroes and foreign dignitaries. Now someone else gives that order, marks the passing of important men while you stand in an orchard struggling to prune apple trees. It feels like rehearsal, your own death approaching in slow increments, each failed gesture and laboured breath a step closer to the inevitable. The flag at half-mast today for someone else, tomorrow for you. The thought doesn't frighten you as much as it should. It just feels true, an acknowledgement of what's coming. You make it back to the house, leaning slightly on the doorframe as you enter. A servant takes the pruning shears from your hand without comment. They've learned not to comment, learned to see your struggles without acknowledging them. You're grateful for their discretion, even though you know it's not discretion. It's training. They've been trained not to see, trained to make the master comfortable by pretending he's still capable. The orchard remains half-pruned. The work remains undone. The dog has disappeared back into the woods. The flag on the horizon still hangs at half-mast. For a moment you forgot the noise of the world. Now it comes rushing back, all the demands and pressures and expectations. You're back inside the frame, back to being George Washington, back to carrying a weight that never quite settles comfortably on your shoulders, until you see the flag at half-mast on the horizon. Someone else's death, not yours. Yet. The courier arrives in the afternoon, mud on his boots and an apologetic expression on his face. He's ridden hard, that much is clear from the state of his horse and his clothes. He holds his hat in his hands, waiting to be acknowledged, following the protocol that everyone follows around you. You're in the study when they announce him. Part of you wants to send him away, to refuse whatever message he's carrying. Nothing good comes from urgent deliveries. But you've never refused a message in your life, so you don't start now. The envelope bears Jefferson's seal, pressed in red wax that's cracked from the journey. You take it without comment, waiting for the courier to leave before you open it. He lingers, probably expecting a response to carry back. You dismiss him with instructions to rest his horse and take refreshment from the kitchen. He bows, backs out of the room, closes the door softly. You're alone with the letter. You know what it is before you open it. You can feel the weight of it. Not the paper, but what's written on it. Jefferson only writes when there's trouble, and there's always trouble. You break the seal carefully, unfold the pages, begin to read. His handwriting is familiar, precise, the letters formed with architectural care. The message is less precise, couched in diplomatic language that barely disguises the urgency underneath. The nation is splitting, he writes. The Federalists and Republicans are beyond compromise. There's talk of secession in Virginia, of the Western Territories going their own way. The Alien and Sedition Acts have pushed things to a breaking point. Jefferson writes carefully, never quite saying that civil war is possible, but the implication hangs between every line. He asks what you think. He asks if you might consider speaking publicly, using your influence to calm tensions. He asks, without quite asking, if you would come back to Philadelphia and lend your presence to the Republican cause. You read the letter twice, then a third time. Your hands won't stop shaking, though you're not sure if that's the message or just your body's continued betrayal. The nation is splitting. You knew this. You've known it for years, watched it happen in slow motion, seen the factions harden and the rhetoric escalate. But seeing it written down, seeing Jefferson's carefully chosen words acknowledge what everyone's been pretending isn't true, makes it real in a way it wasn't before. You walk to the window, letter still in hand. The light is failing, afternoon sliding into evening. The Potomac is visible through the bare trees, grey water moving south. Somewhere beyond that horizon is the nation you helped build, tearing itself apart. The letter crinkles in your grip. You're holding it too tightly, your fingers white-knuckled despite their weakness. You force yourself to relax, to breathe, to think clearly about what Jefferson is asking. He wants you to take a side. That's what this is really about. He wants George Washington to align with the Republicans against the Federalists, to use your credibility to win a political fight. He's dressing it up as concern for the nation, as a plea for unity, but underneath he wants you to pick his team, You can't do that. You won't do that. That's exactly the kind of factionalism you warned against in your farewell address. But refusing to choose is itself a choice. Staying silent lets events unfold without your input, without your influence. Maybe that's what you should do. Maybe the nation needs to have this fight without the father figure trying to referee. The thought makes you feel like a coward. You fold the letter carefully, put it on your desk beside the pile of others waiting for responses. Your hands are still shaking. You press them flat against the desk, try to force them steady through will alone. It doesn't work. Jefferson wrote, "The nation is splitting. General. He's the only one who still calls you that. Everyone else says Mr. President, even though you haven't held the office in 2 years. Jefferson calls you General, reminding you of who you were before politics complicated everything. It feels manipulative and sincere at the same time. The room is growing dark. You should light candles, should make yourself visible, should do something other than stand here feeling helpless. But helpless is exactly what you are. You have no authority anymore, no office, no ability to give orders that anyone has to follow. You're just an old man on a farm, reading letters about disasters you can't prevent." Your chest tightens again, that familiar pain that's been getting worse. You sink into your chair, wait for it to pass. The letter sits on the desk in front of you, demanding response. Demanding action. Demanding that you be the person everyone thinks you are. You can't be that person anymore. You're not sure you ever were. The shaking in your hands spreads to your arms, then your whole body. Not fear, though there's fear mixed in. Just the physical manifestation of pressure, of weight, of demands that exceed your capacity. You sit there shaking, staring at Jefferson's careful handwriting, at words that describe the nation coming apart at the seams, and you don't know what to do. You've never known what to do, not really. You just did your best and hoped it was enough. It was never enough. The nation is splitting, and sitting here in this dark room, hands shaking, chest tight, you realise that you can't stop it. You never could. All your authority, all your reputation, all the weight of being George Washington amounts to nothing when measured against the forces that pull nations apart. You'll write a response eventually. You'll say something diplomatic and careful that commits you to nothing. You'll decline Jefferson's invitation, politely and firmly, and you'll try to stay above the fight. But sitting here in the gathering darkness, you know the truth. The nation is splitting, and you're powerless to stop it. The only question is whether they'll blame you for stepping down, or blame you for ever having stepped up at all. You walk the length of the room, counting your steps like drills. Heel to toe, measured pace, the rhythm of a man who spent years marching armies across difficult terrain. 19 steps from the door to the window, 19 steps back. You've walked this circuit 1,000 times. Maybe more, pacing while you think. The repetition helps. The counting keeps your mind from spinning out into chaos. The letter from Jefferson sits on your desk, waiting. You've been avoiding it for an hour now, walking instead of writing, moving instead of deciding. Your body wants to keep moving, needs the motion even though it hurts. Your hip complains with each turn. Your breathing gets shorter with each circuit. You ignore both. You think of the slaves outside living their lives in the quarters you built for them. Living. That's a generous word for what they do. Existing. Surviving. Waiting for a freedom you've promised in your will but haven't given while you're alive. The hypocrisy sits in your stomach like a stone, heavy and cold and impossible to digest. Freedom's unfinished promise. That's what Jefferson would call it. Though he's no better than you are. Worse, maybe. At least you've arranged for your slaves to be freed when you die. Jefferson's never going to do that. He needs them too much, financially and otherwise. But you need them too, and knowing that makes you complicit. The revolution was supposed to be about liberty. All men created equal. You said the words. You led the army that fought for those words. You helped build a government founded on those principles. But you did it all while owning human beings. The contradiction doesn't escape you. It's never escaped you. You've just learned to live with it, to compartmentalize, to tell yourself that you'll fix it later when the time is right. Later never comes, the time is never right. And now you're 67 years old with a weak heart and shaking hands, and the slaves are still in their quarters, still working your fields, still waiting for a freedom you could give them today if you had the courage. You stop walking and stand at the window, looking out toward the quarters. Smoke rises from their chimneys. You can't see the people from here, just the buildings, the physical structures of bondage. You built those structures. You maintain them. You profit from them. This is your doing. The Constitution sits in Philadelphia, framed and revered, the document you helped create. It's brilliant, or so everyone says. A system of checks and balances, a framework for self-government, a radical experiment in democracy. It's also a compromise with evil. 3/5 of a person. That's what you agreed to. You let slaveholders count their human property as partial people for purposes of representation, gave them more power in Congress because they owned more slaves. You did this to keep the South in the Union, to prevent the nation from breaking apart before it even began. Did I build this wrong? The question echoes in your mind, has been echoing for years now. You built a nation on the principle of freedom while preserving slavery. You created a system that was supposed to be better than monarchy but still treated human beings as property. You made compromises that seemed necessary at the time but look like moral cowardice now. In 200 years, will they call you hero or hypocrite? The question keeps you awake at night. You try to imagine historians in some distant future, reading about your life, judging your choices. What will they see? The man who could have been king but chose to step down? Or the man who owned slaves and did nothing to end the institution? Both, probably. History is rarely simple, but you want it to be simple. You want to be remembered as the hero, the founder, the indispensable man. You don't want to be remembered as the hypocrite who preached liberty while practicing bondage. You turn back to the room, resume your pacing. 19 steps. Turn 19 steps back. Your mind works through the problems like it worked through military strategy, looking for solutions, for ways to achieve objectives. But this isn't a military problem. You can't maneuver around it or outflank it. The contradiction is built into the foundation of everything you've done. You think of the Constitution again, that brilliant compromise document. You helped write it, helped argue for its ratification, helped implement it as president. You swore to preserve, protect, and defend it, and it's fragile as paper, heavy as stone. It's both at once. Paper thin when you consider how easily it could be torn up, how few years it's actually been in force, how close the nation came to not adopting it at all. Heavy as stone when you consider the weight of its compromises, the burden of its contradictions, the permanence of the choices you made. The slave clauses were supposed to be temporary. That's what you told yourself. The 3/5 compromise, the fugitive slave clause, the prohibition on banning the slave trade until 1808. All of these were meant to be stepping stones toward eventual abolition. You'd hold the nation together long enough for attitudes to change, for economics to shift, for the southern states to see reason and give up their peculiar institution voluntarily. It's not working. You know it's not working. The South is more committed to slavery now than it was in 1787. They've built their entire economy around it, created ideologies to justify it, convinced themselves it's not just necessary but good. And the North isn't much better. They'll argue against slavery in principle, while profiting from it in practice, buying cotton grown by slaves, selling goods manufactured from that cotton, participating in the system while claiming moral superiority. You stop at your desk, pick up a pen, put it down again. You should write to Jefferson. You should respond to his warning about the nation splitting. But what can you say? That you saw this coming, that the compromises you made were always going to lead here, to this moment when the factions can't hold together anymore? The pen sits on the desk, waiting. Your hand hovers over it, but doesn't pick it up. You're afraid of what you might write if you start, afraid you might tell the truth for once, that you don't know how to fix what you helped break, that you built a nation on contradictions and now those contradictions are pulling it apart, that you're sorry, but sorry doesn't change anything. Your legs are tired from pacing. You sink into your chair, feeling every one of your 67 years. The room is dim, the fire burning low. You should add wood. You should light candles. You should do something productive instead of sitting here cataloguing your failures. In 200 years, they'll still argue who you really were. You know this with absolute certainty. You'll be refought, reinterpreted, claimed by different sides as proof of their positions. They'll make you a symbol, strip away your humanity, turn you into whatever they need you to be. The man will disappear, and only the myth will remain. You just hope they'll forgive you. For the slaves you owned, for the compromises you made, for building something beautiful and flawed, something that proclaimed liberty while practicing bondage, something that could have been better if you'd been braver. You pick up the pen again, Your hand shakes, but you force it steady. You begin to write, slowly, carefully, the words forming despite your body's rebellion. You don't respond to Jefferson yet. Instead, you write a note to yourself, words you'll never send to anyone. I built a nation on paper, supported by stone, compromised by chains. I hope it survives my failures. I hope they forgive me for not being strong enough to break the chains when I had the power. I hope history understands that I was just a man, trying to do my best with tools I didn't fully understand, in a time when the right choices weren't clear. You put the pen down. The note sits there, confession and excuse mixed together. You'll burn it later. No one needs to read it. It's just for you, acknowledgement of what you can't change and won't admit publicly. The counting begins again. 19 steps to the window, 19 steps back. The rhythm of a soldier's march, the discipline that holds you together when everything else falls apart. You keep walking, keep counting, keep trying to answer questions that have no good answers. Did you build this wrong? Probably. Will they forgive you? Maybe. In 200 years, will they understand? You doubt it, but you hope. That's all you have left now. Hope that history will be kinder than you deserve. You write back in perfect script, each letter formed with the care of a man who knows his words will be preserved and analysed. The response to Jefferson takes an hour to compose, though the substance could be stated in a paragraph. You write about unity, about the importance of maintaining the republic, about staying above faction and party. The words sound certain even if you're not. The republic will endure. You write this near the end, a declarative statement that allows no doubt. You don't believe it, not entirely, but belief isn't required. Jefferson needs reassurance, needs to feel like someone still has confidence in the experiment. You give him the words even though they taste like ash in your mouth. You sign your name with a flourish, the signature you've perfected over decades. G. Washington. The letters flow with practiced ease, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought would make your hand shake. You've signed your name thousands of times, on commissions, on orders, on treaties, on legislation. Each signature is supposed to mean something, carry weight, represent authority. Now it's just marks on paper, habit without power. You fold the letter precisely, crease it with care, melt wax for the seal. Red wax, the colour of your seal ring. You press it down firmly, feeling the wax warm against your finger through the metal. When you lift the ring, your initials remain stamped in wax. This is how you mark things as yours, as official, as worthy of attention. A blob of coloured wax and a symbol. It seems absurd when you think about it too long. The letter goes in the outgoing pile. Someone will take it to the post, and in a week or two Jefferson will read your measured words and feel reassured or disappointed or both. He'll show it to his allies, probably. Use it as evidence that Washington still supports the Republican cause, or that Washington is hopelessly out of touch, or whatever interpretation serves his purposes. Your words will be taken out of context, analysed, debated, used as ammunition in fights you want no part of. You dictate orders for estate repairs, speaking slowly so the clerk can keep up. The barn needs new shingles. The fence along the north field needs replacing. The dock at the river is rotting and should be rebuilt before someone falls through. Mundane concerns, the kind of thing that keeps a property functioning. You list them methodically, prioritising by urgency and cost, making decisions about wood and labour and timing. This is what your authority looks like now. Not military campaigns or constitutional conventions, but maintenance decisions on a Virginia farm. The scale is different, but the process is the same. Assess the situation, determine priorities, allocate resources, issue clear instructions. You've been doing this your entire adult life. The venue has changed, but the skill set hasn't. Visitors arrive in the afternoon. Dignitaries from Alexandria come to pay their respects. You greet them in the parlour, Martha beside you, both of you playing your roles with practiced ease. They want to talk about the old days, about the war, about your presidency. You give them stories, carefully edited versions of events that confirm what they already believe. The Battle of Trenton becomes an adventure, all heroism and daring, none of the fear and uncertainty. Your first inaugural becomes a moment of destiny rather than a terrifying step into unknown territory. You tell them what they want to hear, and they go away satisfied, convinced they've spent time with the great man himself. They don't see you. They see George Washington, the myth, the symbol. You're just the actor playing the role, hitting your marks, delivering the lines that are expected. After decades of performance, you've gotten very good at this. You can smile warmly while feeling nothing. You can grasp hands with enthusiasm while wishing they'd leave. You can be the person they need you to be while the actual you, whatever that is, watches from somewhere deep inside. Martha knows. She always knows. When the visitors leave and you slump in your chair, the mask falling away, she doesn't comment. She just puts a hand on your shoulder, a brief touch that says she understands. You've been married long enough that whole conversations happen in gestures. The shoulder touch means, I know you're tired. I know you're performing. I know the difference between you and the role. You shake hands with rehearsed warmth, the grip firm despite your aching fingers. Each visitor gets the same treatment. Eye contact, strong handshake, a few personal words that make them feel seen. This is a skill you learned young and perfected in command. Make each person feel important. Make them believe you remember them specifically. Make them leave feeling valued. It doesn't matter if you'll forget them the moment they're gone. What matters is the impression you create while they're here. They still see the general. Even the ones who only knew you as president call you general in their minds. You can tell by how they stand a little straighter, how their voices get slightly more formal, how they reference military service even when discussing civilian matters. You're frozen in time for them, forever the commander at Valley Forge or Yorktown, never the aging farmer with shaking hands and a weak heart. They still salute the myth. Not literally, not anymore, but the gesture is there, the deference, the reverence, the sense that being in your presence is an honour. You want to tell them there's no honour in it, that you're just a man who's tired and cold and uncertain about everything, but you don't. You let them keep their illusions. The myth is more useful than the man ever was. Evening comes and you're alone in the study again. The fire burns low, the correspondence is finished, at least for today. Tomorrow there will be more letters, more decisions, more demands on your attention, but for now, you're done. You've performed your duties, played your role, been George Washington for everyone who needed you to be. You remove your coat, hang it carefully. You loosen your collar, feeling the relief of not being constricted. Small comforts, but they matter. The wig comes off next, placed on its stand. Your scalp itches where the wig sat, hot and uncomfortable. You scratch absently, feeling your real hair thin and grey. Nothing like the carefully powdered wig that makes you look more presidential. Without the coat and wig, you look different. Smaller, older, more human. This is what you actually look like, but almost no one sees it. Martha does, your valet does. That's about it. Everyone else gets the performance, the costume, the carefully maintained image. You sit at your desk and stare at nothing. The day has exhausted you, not from physical labour, but from the constant effort of being someone you're not, or being a version of yourself that's true but incomplete. Emphasis on the parts that make good stories and avoidance of the parts that don't. The Republic will endure. You wrote those words to Jefferson, meant them as reassurance. Sitting here now, stripped of the costume and the performance, you're not sure you believe them. The Republic might endure, or it might not. Either way, your ability to affect the outcome has shrunk to almost nothing. You can write careful letters and give measured advice, and try to stay above the factions. But you can't hold the nation together through force of will anymore. You're just a man now, not a general, not a president, just George Washington the person, whoever that is underneath all the roles and performances. And that person is tired, uncertain, afraid of what comes next, but too disciplined to show it. That person writes letters that sound certain even when he's not, greets visitors with warmth he doesn't feel, and goes through the motions because that's what's expected. They still see the general. They still salute the myth. And you let them, because the myth is stronger than the truth. The myth can reassure Jefferson and greet dignitaries and hold the idea of the Republic together, even when the reality is falling apart. The man can't do any of that. So the man hides, and the myth continues its work, and everyone pretends not to notice the difference. The fire needs wood. You should call someone to tend it, but you sit instead, watching the flames die down to embers, feeling the cold creep back into the room. Tomorrow you'll put the costume back on, resume the performance, be George Washington again. Tonight, you're just tired. The candles burn low, their flames guttering in the draughts that find every crack in the old house. Shadows stretch across the floor, reaching toward you like dark water rising. You should replace the candles, should add wood to the fire, should do something about the gathering dark. Instead, you sit and let it come. Outside, the Potomac gleams like a blade in the last of the daylight. The river catches what little light remains and throws it back, a ribbon of silver cutting through the landscape. You've lived beside this river for decades, watched it in every season, every weather. It's constant in a way nothing else is. Empires rise and fall, nations tear themselves apart, men grow old and die. But the river just keeps moving. The house grows too quiet. The servants have finished their evening tasks and retreated to their quarters. Martha is somewhere upstairs, probably reading or preparing for bed. The visitors are gone, back to Alexandria with their stories about meeting George Washington. You're alone with the dying fire and the encroaching darkness, and the silence feels heavy, oppressive, like something waiting. Even the crickets seem to listen. That's absurd, you know. Crickets don't listen. They just make noise, mechanical and thoughtless, part of the background sound of a Virginia night. But tonight their chirping sounds different, more deliberate, as if they're paying attention to something, as if the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. You remove your wig, placing it carefully on the stand beside your desk. Your scalp itches where the horsehair sat, hot and uncomfortable despite the room's chill. You scratch with both hands, feeling your real hair, thin and damp with sweat. The wig is part of the costume, part of being George Washington in public. Without it, you're just an old man with thinning grey hair and a tired face. Your fingers find the straps and buckles, the fastenings that hold the performance together. Collar loosened, vest unbuttoned, shoes off. Each layer removed is a small relief, a step away from the public figure and toward whatever private self remains. You stand in your shirt sleeves and stocking feet, feeling vulnerable in a way you never do when fully dressed. For the first time today, you whisper to no one. "Will they forgive me?" The words come out hoarse, barely audible. You haven't meant to speak them aloud. They were supposed to stay inside, locked away with all the other doubts and fears you don't acknowledge. But the silence and the darkness have pulled them out, made them real by giving them sound. Will they forgive me? For the compromises, for the failures, for building something flawed and calling it perfect, for owning slaves while preaching liberty, for stepping down when the nation needed leadership, for not being the man the myth claims you were. The room doesn't answer. The shadows just continue their advance, swallowing the edges of the furniture, turning familiar objects into vague shapes. The fire pops once, sending up a brief shower of sparks, then settles back to its slow dying. You walk to the window and stand there, one hand on the frame. The glass is cold against your palm. Outside, darkness is winning its daily battle against light. The sky fades from grey to charcoal to black. The Potomac loses its gleam, becomes just another shadow in a landscape of shadows. You think about forgiveness, about what it means, about who grants it. Martha has forgiven you for the years away at war, for the presidency that kept you from her, for choosing the nation over the marriage more times than you can count. She's forgiven you, or learned to live with unforgiveness, which amounts to the same thing after enough years. The soldiers might forgive you, those who survived. You led them to victory eventually, after years of defeat and retreat and winter camps that killed more men than battles did. Victory covers a multitude of sins. The dead can't forgive. They're beyond such concerns. But their widows and orphans might not be so generous. History will judge. That's what everyone says, as if history is a wise old man sitting in judgment, carefully weighing evidence before rendering a verdict. But history isn't a person. It's just whatever story the living tell about the dead, and that story changes depending on who's telling it and what they need it to mean. In 200 years, will they even remember your name, or will you be a footnote, a curiosity, the first president whose main achievement was not screwing things up so badly that the experiment failed immediately? Maybe they'll have emperor-presidents by then, strongmen who held on to power the way you could have but didn't. Maybe your restraint will look like weakness, your stepping down like abdication of responsibility. Or maybe the Republic will have survived and grown into something you can't imagine, something better than what you built. Maybe they'll look back at your compromises and your failures and understand that you were working with impossible materials, trying to build something new from the wreckage of the old. Maybe they'll forgive you for not being perfect because they'll understand that perfection wasn't possible. You don't believe that. Not really. You've read enough history to know how it treats the dead. It simplifies them, turns them into symbols, strips away the complexity and doubt, and just makes them represent whatever the present needs them to represent. You'll be marble in 200 years, one way or another. The question is just what kind of monument they'll build. The darkness is almost complete now. The room has become a collection of shapes and suggestions, familiar objects rendered strange by the absence of light. You should light new candles, you should build up the fire, you should make yourself visible, should resist the darkness, but you stay at the window, looking out at nothing, letting the night take you. Your reflection appears in the glass, faint and ghostly. You can barely make out your features, just the suggestion of a face, a shape that might be human. This is what you'll become, eventually. A ghost, a suggestion, an outline that people fill in with their own expectations and needs. George Washington the myth, empty of content, ready to mean whatever the moment requires. Will they forgive me? You say it again, louder this time. The words echo slightly in the dark room, bounce off walls and come back to you. Will they forgive me? Will they forgive me? No answer comes. You didn't expect one. This is a question you'll die not knowing the answer to. A question that can only be answered by people who haven't been born yet. All you can do is hope. Hope that they'll see you tried, that you did your best with limited tools and imperfect understanding, that you built something despite having no template to work from. Hope that they'll forgive you for being human when they wanted you to be divine. Hope that they'll understand you were just a man, scared and uncertain and doing his best not to show it. Hope that 200 years will give them enough distance to see you clearly, to separate the person from the myth, to judge with compassion rather than expectation. The candle on your desk gutters and dies, smoke rising in a thin line. The smell of hot wax and burnt wick fills the air. Another light gone, another small defeat in the day's long battle against darkness. Soon the fire will die too, and the room will be completely dark, and you'll have to fumble your way to bed like a blind man, hands outstretched, feeling for obstacles. But not yet. For now you stand at the window in the gathering dark, a ghost looking at his own reflection, whispering questions to an empty room. The house creaks around you, old wood settling, foundation shifting, the slow decay that comes for all structures eventually. The crickets continue their chorus. The Potomac keeps moving in the darkness, and you stand here alone, hoping for forgiveness from people who haven't been born yet, for crimes you're not sure you committed, from a judgment you'll never hear. Will they forgive me? One more time, softer now, almost inaudible. A prayer maybe, or a confession. The darkness doesn't answer, but it doesn't condemn either. It just surrounds you, patient and complete, waiting for you to stop asking questions and accept what's coming. The candle gutters, spilling wax like blood. That's melodramatic, you know. Wax isn't blood. A candle dying isn't a metaphor for anything. But standing here in the darkness, watching the last light fail, it's hard not to see symbols everywhere. Hard not to read meaning into accident, pattern into chaos. In 200 years, they'll still argue who you really were. The thought returns like a refrain, like something you can't escape. Hero or hypocrite, founder or fraud, marble or man. The arguments will continue long after you're dust, each generation refighting the same battles, using your name as a weapon in their own conflicts. You just hope they'll forgive you. That's all. Not understand, necessarily. Not excuse. Just forgive. Acknowledge that you were human, that you failed, that you tried anyway, that you built something imperfect because perfection wasn't available, that you compromised because compromise was the only way forward, that you stepped down because you believed in something larger than yourself, even when you weren't sure what that something was. The hope feels fragile, like the last candle flame before it dies, but it's all you have. So you hold it carefully, protect it from the wind, and whisper one more time into the darkness. I hope they'll forgive me. The darkness offers no reply. The candle dies, the fire fades to embers, and you stand alone in the growing night, just a man in an empty room, waiting for a judgment that won't come in your lifetime.